Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Bugay. Let's start with the latest developments in our country. Security, defense and financial cooperation, including an over 100 million aid package. These topics are expected to be discussed between two presidents in Washington, D.C. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy meets with his U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden. Among other issues earlier highlighted by the president, the Nord Stream 2 project, which will be one of the key topics. Also, President Zelenskyy earlier said that he saw clear vision and support by the U.S. Energy Ministry over this issue. On the outcome of the high meeting, see in our next bulletin. A number of strategic documents are planned to be signed following the meeting of the presidents of Ukraine and the United States. This was stated by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba. He called the visit of Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the United States, quote, very successful with specific agreements. The leaders of the countries will hold a one-on-one meeting. Based on the results, the presidents will publish a joint statement.
The joint statement will be very long, very detailed and substantive. There will be very important political signals as well as concrete things about what assistance the United States will provide to Ukraine. One of the elements of the statement has already become public. It is the allocation of $60 million in military aid by the President of the United States just before the visit of the President of Ukraine. In particular, this money will provide Ukraine with additional Javelin anti-tank missiles. The Nord Stream 2 issue will also be discussed at the thematic meetings. This is one of the key issues of our talks in Washington.
Ukraine and the United States signed an agreement of the strategic framework for a defense partnership. The document became the result of a meeting between the United States Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who is in Washington on an official visit. President of Ukraine noted that Kyiv appreciates the U.S. support in joining NATO, as well as in countering Russian aggression and supporting the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Defending our independence, our sovereignty, our territorial integrity and fighting the occupation of eastern Ukraine and the temporary occupation of the Ukrainian peninsula. I'm glad that we have the reliable support of our strategic partner, the United States of America.
The U.S.-Ukraine Strategic Defense Framework that Minister Tehran and I will sign today enhances our cooperation and advances our shared priorities, such as ensuring that our bilateral security cooperation continues to help Ukraine counter Russian aggression.
Yesterday, the president has also discussed the issues of energy security of Ukraine and the region with the U.S. Secretary of Energy, including threats from Nord Stream 2 for our country and Europe. The Ukrainian Energoatom enterprise and the American Westinghouse Electric signed a memorandum on the construction of a power unit at the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant. Volodymyr Zelenskyy has also discussed the projects Ukraine can join with the head of NASA. Its head, Bill Nelson, in turn accepted the invitation to visit our country. Also, President of Ukraine and the First Lady visited the memorial to the victims of the 1932-1933 Holodomor famine and laid symbolic sheaves of wheat at the foot of the memorial. The United States is ready to help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. This was stated by the former special representative of the U.S. Department of State for Ukraine, Volker, in an exclusive interview to our TV channel. He believes that the United States should be more actively involved in resolving the situation in the eastern Ukraine, and this does not necessarily apply to negotiations in the Normandy format, as all the participants can oppose its extension. But Volker is sure that the United States can really help Ukraine, no matter in what format this will happen.
The real issue here is changing Russia's calculation. Right now, Russia feels it can continue its aggression against Ukraine with relatively little cost or pushback. not from France and Germany, not in the context of negotiations. So it'll continue. What the U.S. needs to do is play a leading diplomatic role, getting France, Germany, NATO, EU, UK, Canada, IMF, everybody on the same page to be pushing back on Russian aggression so that Russia sees that its situation is going to get worse. So it can't just continue as is and not paying much of a cost. Russia's situation will get worse the longer it continues the war.
Southern Ukrainian school kids sat down at their desks for the first time today. A new academic year has started in Ukraine. Schools in the country started working as usual. All regions are currently in the green quarantine zone. The Cabinet of Ministers recommended to abstain from school-wide celebrations and asked to divide children into groups. It was up to each school to decide to hold ceremonial lines or not. Support blue-collar professions and provide specialists with worthy salaries. Prime Minister of Ukraine Denis Shmyhal promised to do this. He visited a vocational school in Kyiv together with Minister of Education and Science. They noted the importance of the professions that students have chosen because Ukraine lacks the specialists.
We want to focus our attention on vocational education. Today there is a demand for such practical skills for blue-collar professionals, for workers who have practical training. Therefore, we lay stress on the dual training system, when the training is held both by an institution and the company, based on the agreement giving advantage for the student and providing them with prospect of future employment. Today we are on the threshold of significant changes in vocational and technical education. A new law is being prepared. A working group is hammering one to separate supervisors of manufacturing training and the student inflow in vocational education institutions. And you can count on the support of the President, Prime Minister and the support of the government. Vocational training is today's top priority.
The tax amnesty comes into force in Ukraine at the start of the fall. This indicates asset disclosure program is also to be launched. Tax officers insist that is a voluntary action. The program gives an opportunity to reveal incomes and property acquired before the current year. Why citizens should not be afraid of the new tax declaration system, my colleagues found out.
$50 billion. This is how much shadow cash reportedly is being kept under the mattress by Ukrainians. Head of the Parliamentary Tax Policy Committee Danilo Hetmantsev says, meaning these funds do not appear in the declarations with not a penny of taxes paid to the budget. Thanks to one-time voluntary declaration of assets, Ukrainians will be able to not only legalize shadow cash, but also escape them from liability for violation of tax and currency legislation.
Just collecting money to the state budget, this is not our purpose. The main objective, firstly, is to let people start everything over. Secondly, this is the way to provide additional economic growth for the country, thanks to the increase in investment activity. Otherwise, the shadow money goes down in value.
The sense of a one-time declaration is to allow Ukrainians to whitewash their income and the existing property. This also works if a person hasn't paid tax, for example, for the acquisition of a land plot. Any Ukrainian can legalize their income, except for civil servants and those who have filed declarations since 2010. One is allowed to declare securities, currency values, movable and immovable estate, including construction in progress, land plots located in Ukraine and abroad. However, not every meant to be honestly acquired property item is subject to declaration.
Some of
the possessions may evade declaration, for example, one or a couple of apartments that in total do not exceed 120 square meters. Or if you got a little household that is less than 240 square meters of area, it also does not subject to declaration. Also, a vehicle that costs less than $15,000, the declaration is not required for it.
5% tax is paid for the deposit in Ukrainian bank. 9% tax is exempted for the assets kept in foreign currency or held in foreign banks. Payment for the income from the state bonds equals 2.5% level. The disclosure is meant to be voluntary, the state tax service states.
Одноразове декларування – це
One-time voluntary declaration is not of the tax purpose. We are not talking about the income. The main aim of the one-time voluntary declaration, this is the ability to change over to the honest and transparent financial relations between citizens.
Zero declaration is not a Ukrainian invention. This is a true and successful worldwide proven record, tax officers state. The tax amnesty is set to start in Ukraine on the 1st of September, reported by Nick Starkov, UATV News.
Privileges for the vaccinated. The authorities intend to impose restrictions for Ukrainians who do not want to get vaccinated against coronavirus. What areas will be affected by these prohibitions, and when do we have to expect them? My colleagues know.
Entertainment centers, cinemas, restaurants will soon be available not for everyone. To avoid the spread of coronavirus, Ukraine is developing restrictions for those who do not want to get vaccinated. They are planned to be introduced when at least half of Ukrainians receive their jabs. It can happen even earlier if the epidemiological situation gets worse.
Сьогодні і Франція, і Іспанія,
France, Spain, the United Kingdom and the United States offer certain things that were not previously allowed for those vaccinated during quarantine restrictions. In particular, cinemas can work. We see how catering, shopping and entertainment centers work. These options for how certain sectors of the economy can work during quarantine restrictions have also been developed in Ukraine. We will announce all this, discuss it at the government meeting and will submit them to the Cabinet of Ministers' consideration in the nearest future.
Despite the fact that mandatory vaccination against COVID-19 is not foreseen in Ukraine, unvaccinated employees who work in government agencies in the provision of services or industrial production may be temporarily suspended from duties according to the law. Forced vaccination under the threat of dismissal is illegal, human rights activists say.
Если, например, даже на вашем предприятии относительно к вашей должности
Even if at your enterprise the employer organizes vaccination and expects you to voice a desire to get a jab, he or she can only apply dismissal from work in case you refuse, not fire you. These actions are considered illegal. If this happens, you can always go to court to protect your rights.
If a person is not ready to be vaccinated due to personal beliefs or medical contraindications, then he or she may temporarily switch to remote work or change specialty in order to avoid contact with people. However, doctors recommend getting vaccinated. Vaccination can save not only a person's life, but also health of relatives.
Vaccination against coronavirus is a national security issue. No one wants a repeat of the pandemic and the number of deaths that we have already experienced. If you are not vaccinated, you are much more likely to get coronavirus, and even in a severe form, with serious consequences to one's heart, blood vessels, lungs, up to death.
First of all, doctors urge people with chronic diseases and those who have already been infected with COVID-19 to get vaccinated.
If you were sick for the first time in a mild form, there is no guarantee that you will not get sick again in a much more severe form.
Since the beginning of vaccination campaign, almost 9 million vaccinations have already been done in Ukraine. Reported by Nick Starkov, Vlada Tsurkan, UATV News.
More than 2,000 new cases of COVID-19 were recorded in Ukraine over the past day. Among the infected are 153 children. This is twice as much as the day before. 52 health workers were also infected with the virus. Most of the cases were confirmed in Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Donetsk regions. The Ministry of Health emphasizes that vaccination is the most effective means of protection against the virus. Also, doctors remind to maintain social distance, avoid crowded places, and be sure to adhere to the mask regime. The official website of Ukraine, Ukraine.ua, has already been translated into 6 languages. A Chinese language version has appeared in addition to English, French, German, Spanish, and Arabic. This was reported in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, noting that over 1.5 billion people speak Chinese throughout the world, and it is one of the official languages of the United Nations. The expansion of the language capabilities of the country's official website contributes to the promotion of a positive image of Ukraine in the world, the Foreign Ministry emphasizes, and this is one of the priorities of the foreign policy strategy. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages.